Tomasetti to be able to talk, introduce Elizabeth, who will share what they've done with NASA technology, how a fixed structure in Brooklyn was able to leverage a rocket that goes up into space. And so with that, Elizabeth.
So the first test is to make sure the audio thing works. And the second is the slides. So then we'll get all the pieces together. But it's so cool sitting next to the space shuttle. Now you're all looking in the wrong direction. So I'm going to just keep looking that way. All right, so my story with this starts in Huntsville, Alabama. Like all good stories, they should start in Huntsville, Alabama. So I had a colleague who went to school with a guy that ended up at NASA, and they were talking at another friend's wedding, which is our New York Space Alliance, right? This is how we got together about this idea that something that NASA had been working on for rockets might be okay for buildings. So Thornton Tomasetti is a company that builds tall buildings. We build, so Taipei 101 was one of the tallest buildings in the world a while ago, and you have to keep trying to build the world's tallest building, but we'll never get as high as what the rockets launch. So we went to Huntsville, Alabama, and the scientists there were looking at how to solve a problem for the Ares 1 rocket. And the Ares 1 rocket wanted to go to Mars, and it's really cool. The only problem is the vibrations were like for the newborn kids. A little bit of vibration isn't good for a newborn. A lot of vibration isn't good for an astronaut. And in order to solve this problem, so like NASA's really cool because first of all, you're putting people on a rocket and sending them up into space, and that's just awesome. And then there's a space shuttle behind you, which is cool. And then I have to mention, you have to look at the Suez rocket. Like, this is what the Americans fly in, and that's what the Russians fly in. So when you walk over, you see like 3 people are inside the cannonball, and this is really big. But so if you're on your way to Mars, and the vibrations are too big to carry into the air, and people start to experiment on how to solve this. The scientists at NASA looked at the liquid oxygen tank and thought that this was the opportunity. So I don't know about you, but I don't think liquid oxygen is something I really want to mess with. But that's why I work with buildings and not with rockets. And so they figured out how to use the liquid oxygen tank and tune the mass of it so that it would help the rocket vibrate less and make the astronauts happy. And they called this technology a fluid harmonic disruptor. And then funding ran out, but I'll get to that part of the story. First, let's talk a little bit about what my day job. So my day job is to work with a bunch of other people who build buildings. We do some other things too. Sometimes we look at heart valves and stuff like that. But for the most part, we look at structures and not structures that shoot in the air. So right now we're near Hudson Yards. We worked on the tower. We called them Tower A and Tower C. They have like different addresses now, but they're sitting on a platform. And when you're there, you don't think they vibrate at all. But I mean, on a windy day in a tall building, sometimes you can hear a creak every 6 seconds, that sort of thing. So all buildings move, and the lighter and the more efficient buildings get, the more important it is to mitigate that movement. And one way to mitigate movement is to use physics. And so I have a few slides with math, because you have to have slides with math if you're presenting on a ship, right? Like, so that's why, if you're taking notes and you want to solve it, that's fine too, but it seems like a personal issue. You should probably get more to drink. So a tuned mass damper in general is a trick to make a building which is like a lollipop, a one degree of freedom system. So it has one frequency. Every building has really just one frequency in each direction that it moves. And if you add a relatively small weight at the top, so 1% the weight of the building, you can make it so it has 2 different frequencies that it moves at. And by that physics trick, this device at the top of the building absorbs all the energy of the movement instead of making the people inside the building sick. So there's a lot of ways that exist already. Not all NASA designed innovations for slowing down a building when it's moving. The pendulum one's the most famous, and it's so if you want to think about it, if you're like a kid on the swing, then your feet are kind of like the pendulum, and if you want to keep swinging higher, then you do exactly what you shouldn't tune your tune mass damper to. You're increasing your resonance, and if you want to slow yourself down, then you swing your feet out of phase, which I don't recommend. It's not fun on the swing, but it's really good if you're building a building. And if you haven't Googled damper babies yet, I think it's the best way to explain like a building, like buildings are supposed to be boring, right? They keep you warm, they keep you safe, and humanity and all that stuff, but they're just there. They don't launch into the air, they'll be cool when they're on Mars, but like, if you want to explain your damper in a way that people are excited to go up to the top of your building, which you do on the Type A 101 building, and then look inside the building at this damper instead of looking outside the window, then you need Hello Kitty to help you explain what's going on. So they even made up like their own language for the damper babies. And if you're in Taiwan, then you definitely, I recommend bringing a damper baby for everyone. So back to NASA. So they developed this technology. So Rob Berry, Jeff Lindner had worked at developing this technology to make a rocket vibrate less and to send people to Mars, which is really cool. And then the direction changed, and the new administration wanted to go to meteorites. So, you know, at NASA, you have a 350-foot tall building that's really cool and really robust, and you just use it to test rockets, so you might as well see if you can shake it and whether or not this idea of using a fluid mass to stop a building from moving is something that can be adapted to structures. So Jeff and Rob and other people at NASA put this 2-foot diameter, 60-foot long pipe at the top of this 350-foot tall building, and then they shook the building, so they put a cart with a weight, and they got the building to move. And so when I visited, when I was in Huntsville, Alabama, they had the device on when we went in. And we went up, and the building was completely quiet. All you could hear was the compressor for the mass that was exciting the building. But there wasn't any movement at all. And walked over, and over here where Jeff has his hand, there's a little switch, which is just a valve in the system. And that's like the best way to sell something, is you have somebody go flip the valve. So I got to flip the valve. And so it went from nothing happening, and you flip the valve, and the whole building starts shaking. So this 2-foot diameter pipe was keeping the whole building from shaking. And now, as a structural engineer, I think, I can hide a 2-foot diameter pipe. I mean, I don't know if you know what's in buildings, but like, there's a lot of water in buildings, and there are really pipes everywhere. I mean, sometimes, you know, there's pipes everywhere, sometimes pipes leak, but we know how to repair pipes when they leak, and they really are, so you can hide them in different places throughout your structure. And so instead of having a ball that has to be the feature of your structure, or a big concrete vat in order to mitigate vibration, we could do something a lot more cost-effective, right? You can buy pipes off the shelf. I mean, these are 2-foot, 3-foot diameter pipes, so you've got to special order them, but it's not the same as welding together a 600-ton steel ball, which is what Type A has. So then, okay, so we saw this technology at NASA. That was great. Now we have to figure out whether or not, you know, we can put this on a structure that people are living in, right? So how to make that leap from something that NASA can handle, people who can ride on rockets and deal with liquid oxygen, and put it in a building that has to be safe and should be boring and should just work, right? We're professional engineers, so we sign off that things are functioning the way they're supposed to and are as safe as they need to be. So we worked with NASA. NASA did some tests for us. Our shake table, my shake table was very, very small, but we got it off eBay, and I'm proud of it too. And I told you there would be more math. So this is, if you look at this closely, then you know how the whole system works. And so that just means if you'd like a job with us, let me know afterwards. But essentially, you have a water air spring, so instead of having a mechanical spring, there's some empty pipes, some pipes with water, and then NASA had worked through this adjustable orifice in order to add damping to this system. And so more conventional systems, or the systems that existed before this, use rather complex gates within the water, or use like pistons like you have on your car to make damping. And all of that is in the water, so it's harder to maintain than things that are outside of the water. And the parts are, again, special order, but not specially manufactured. So around the same time, because things always happen around the same time, modular construction was getting interesting. And there's a building in Atlantic Yards in Brooklyn that's a modular building. And it's lighter, and its construction is more efficient than many of the buildings around it, which means that vibration is important for it, even though it's only 32 stories tall. So usually we have vibration mitigation systems on like 60-story and above buildings, but when you start to get more innovative in how you're building things, so more sustainable, more affordable, then vibration becomes an issue again. And so this is a real building. You can go to Barclays Arena. It's located in Brooklyn, and the building has this system on top of it. So we put these now 3-foot diameter pipes, 4 of them at the top, and they're connected finally. We didn't connect them while we were hoisting them into the air. But so when bankers, steel guys do piping in New York, it's steel, right? So the water that they put into it, the steel union put the water in because it's structural water, which is like a New York detail, but it was important because the plumbing guys would not let us touch it, but the steel guys were okay with us helping tune it, so it had to be structural water. And with glycol, because it's like outside. But so these, and also just if you think about it for a moment, these are like pipes with an upturned end above the Nets stadium, so we have bull's horns above the Nets stadium. But they're working, we had vibrations in the building when we were taking measurements with the system off, and so you have a line that goes up and down. You have a system when it's tuned wrong, which is the kid kicking the swing, so you can make the building move double. And then when we turn the system on, flip the switch, then the vibrations are reduced by half. And this is important because between twice the vibration and half the vibration is the limit of what people can feel when they're lying down. So if we don't have the system on, then some people would get sick or uncomfortable while they're trying to sleep in this building. And with this system on, it's it's got beautiful views, and it's a comfortable place to live in Brooklyn. Another one. So then. No, a lot of this is, Thornton Thomas said he's been around for 70 years. We built tall buildings, but when we were inspired to look at this development from NASA, we got to thinking about maybe we should be in the startup world as well. And so we made our own incubator, called it Twin, and spun off Hummingbird Kinetics. And so this pipe filled with water is a hummingbird because it's lighter than the steel ball. So we had a good comparison, right? Like it's still a pretty heavy pipe, but it's lighter than a steel ball. And there's some other things that were spun off too at that same time, but this is the NASA technology that's actually on a building in Brooklyn. And what's interesting is Motioneering, who builds the steel balls and the concrete vats, at some point got interested in too, so they're a partner now so if you have a tall building and you would like it to move less and you'd want a more maintainable and less expensive system that you can hide in your building, then we're happy to help because NASA helped us get us there. And again, so since this upturned end idea, we've managed to make these pipes straight, which again makes them easier to arrange the floor systems and other things. You do need a whole lot of pipes for a very tall building, right? So if you have a 30-story building, 4 pipes are enough. If you have a 100-story building, then we'll have to hide an array, but it's still got some flexibility to it and can change the way we think about tall buildings when we design them. And we're not launching them into the air yet, but one thing at a time. And that's what I got.